Went down, started digging, and I coined the term midwit obsolescence technology for language models, because what I quickly found was that these models basically represent some sort of aggregate of what the normies believe. So it's basically Wikipedia in a chatbot, and Wikipedia is for what? Midwits. So now we have these language models that can basically garble a bunch of shit, which is no different to what the average CNN reporter or midwit would write on a blog. So therefore, these idiots kind of replace themselves, and anybody who has any sense or any ability to think outside of the Overton window just got an opportunity to be more noticeable, because they can produce signal in amongst all the midwit noise. So anyway, as I started going down the path, before I really came to that conclusion, I asked the question, because I saw early on that these things were just reflectant of a model of the world. I said, can we represent, or can we entrain a new model of the world in a language model, and make it act like a Bitcoiner? And that was sort of the genesis of Spirit of Satoshi. I wanted to do something that was different, and I wanted to build a model that is unlike any other model on the planet. And we talk about how that's gone, but that was the initial premise, and that was the initial idea.
Mr. Aleks Svetski, thank you so much for joining me today and being a playable character. The name of the show, the Playable Character Show, and like we were talking off stage, finding people that can think critically in this world is very rare in a sea of non-playable characters. So I appreciate you joining me today. A prolific writer and ranter, purveyor of truth, written many, many books, articles that I'm sure many of the listeners have seen. And if those that are new to space, please go check those out. Wrote the Uncommunist Manifesto, the Bitcoin Times leads that charge, and the Bushido of Bitcoin, by the way, coming in soon in the future. I know it is. I know you've been saying that for a while, so it's kind of the running joke in a way. And the big thing that we're here to really kind of start off with today is building non-cringe AI things in the spirit of Satoshi. Thank you, sir, for coming on today.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you for the beautiful intro. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So we were just talking off stage a little bit. The last couple of years, you kind of went into hiding. I gave you my backstory, and I kind of caught the tail end of your, really public persona a few years ago, and you kind of went into hiding a little bit. And didn't mean that you weren't working on stuff, because again, that's what we're here to talk about today. So give us the last, really, I guess, couple of years synopsis, but leading up to what you are so excited about right now.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was very much a public persona on Twitter for a number of years there, and particularly during the COVID, I think there was sort of three standout voices, maybe four, in the Bitcoin camp. Very early on was myself, Saifedean, Francis Pouliot, and Giacomo Zucco. Like, we were sort of like the four people that was squarely in Bitcoin, but railing against all of the lockdowns and everything like that. And I think all of our accounts to some degree, got shadow banned, this and that. I found my way into non-Bitcoin groups and really started talking about trying to orange pill them and presenting Bitcoin as a solution to all of these people that were, skeptical about injecting themselves and skeptical about lockdowns and all this sort of stuff. And I think that, that kind of brought me a level of notoriety that I don't know, didn't do well in a professional capacity. So, after a little bit of time, I decided to look. I've been kicking, bitching, screaming, and yelling at people for too long on Twitter. It's a real waste of energy, and I was a little bit disappointed by some of sort of the way the community behaved afterwards. So anyway, I just thought, I'm done with this shit. I'm out, and I'm just gonna go and write and build stuff. Got married, took a bit of a hiatus. But yeah, in particular, while I've been away, writing has been a big part of things. The Bushido of Bitcoin is sort of the main thing in a writing capacity that I've been working on, and I'm up to draft number 6 or whatever. I keep rewriting sections. I keep sort of adding to things. I keep Because I read quite broadly, and I listen to a lot of history, historical fiction, all this sort of stuff, and it inspires me. And I'm like, oh man, that's a beautiful nugget that I want to embed in there somewhere. And that's a fantastic quote, or that's a awesome aphorism. And then I sort of like I start by embedding a little bit, and then I end up writing a whole thing. I'm like, fuck, okay, now this needs to be integrated somewhere in the book. So it's been a process, but I think I can say now pretty confidently that the crux of the book is there. I found what I think is probably the best editor on the planet for this book specifically. He goes by the NIM John Carter, and I actually personally believe he's probably the best writer on the planet at the moment. He's not in the Bitcoin space. He's sort of in like the emergent dissident right,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like a powerfully nuanced thinker. And yeah, I was sort of following him on Substack for a little while, and when I was seeking out an editor, because I was originally going to have Bitcoin Magazine publish the book, but I wanted to do a lot more with it, which they
Mm.
didn't have the capacity to do. So I decided to take it back, self-publish, find my own editor, find all of that, and it was the best decision because it's allowed me to like the book has really like gone up not a notch but like 10 notches since
Wow.
then, and it's looking special. John is helping me out now, so I'm finishing off the last of it, and yeah, fingers crossed. I'll probably do a campaign for it on Geyser or something like that in the next couple of months. In fact, I would love to do a trading card set for it. I think that'd be a sick idea.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, that aside, that's sort of from a writing capacity. Obviously, the Bitcoin Times as well. And then from a building side of stuff, I've been down the AI rabbit hole, which I'm sure we'll have a bit of a chat about. And I will be open sourcing all the stuff that we've done in the AI space. And there is a little thread of a concept that the AI opportunity opened up for me, which I believe is where my focus is going to start moving into, which is to do with Bitcoin communities and stuff like that. Nothing to disclose just yet, but it's sort of related to all the work that I've been doing the last couple of years, understanding Nostr, Bitcoin AI, everything sort of culminating into one thing.
Wow. What sparked the AI rabbit hole for you? What was it? Was it just, I mean, is it something you were like, hey, I've always kind of been into things like that? Or is that something that just kind of was out of left field for you and just kind of sparked you the right way?
Hmm. So I've been a bit of a technologist for a while, and most people don't know me as that. Like, but I've built software companies for almost a decade now, so I've built all sorts of things. The AI thing. So, notwithstanding the fact that I've sort of been around technology for a little bit, the AI thing was a little bit left of field. Even though I did a podcast with a guy called Rob Malka about 3 years ago now, maybe even longer, maybe 4 years ago. It was, I think, podcast episode 62 or something like that of the Wake Up podcast when I used to run my own show. And Rob was talking about GPT-2 back then.
Wow.
So it was pre-GPT-3. And at the time I was like, yeah, cute, whatever. Not interested. And we ended up talking about Nietzsche the whole time, right? And so funny enough, GPT-3 comes around, and I get all the flashbacks about the off-camera discussion that Rob and I had, and I was like, "Fuck, okay, he was onto something." So I then, like a lot of people, got super excited about it, started going down the rabbit hole, and the more I dug, the more I found something that initially was very, 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 very intriguing. If you ask me now, I think most of AI is just smoke and mirrors. It's like Wizard of Oz, a bunch of people behind a green curtain. But notwithstanding, at the time, I was under the impression that this is incredible, it's huge, it's going to transform the world. And me sort of being both a software guy plus a linguist in some sense,
Mm,
like, and I'm not a linguist, but as in like I write stuff.
right.
Language models became interesting. I was like, holy shit, can we produce this stuff? Like, is my skill of writing going to be made obsolete? Went down, started digging, and I coined the term midwit obsolescence technology for language models, because what I quickly found was that these models basically represent some sort of aggregate of what the normies believe. So it's basically Wikipedia in a chatbot, and Wikipedia is for what? Midwits. So now we have these language models that can basically garble a bunch of shit, which is no different to what the average CNN reporter or midwit would write on a blog. So therefore, these idiots kind of replace themselves, and anybody who has any sense or any ability to think outside of the Overton window just got an opportunity to be more noticeable because they can produce signal in amongst all the midwit noise. So anyway, as I started going down the path, before I really came to that conclusion, I asked the question, because I saw early on that these things were just reflectant of a model of the world. I said, can we represent or can we entrain a new model of the world in a language model and make it act like a Bitcoiner? And that was sort of the genesis of Spirit of Satoshi. I wanted to do something that was different, and I wanted to build a model that is unlike any other model on the planet. And we talk about how that's gone, but that was the initial premise, and that was the initial idea.
Do you? So I was telling you earlier that I was having a conversation with Dr. Jeff Ross, and we were talking about. You'll see where I'm going with this in a second. We were talking about the intranet versus the internet, and we were talking about free banking. People have this weird, especially like Gen Xers, they have like the gold bugs and things of that nature. That like a George Gammon, for example, is a very hard time. Like, well, we tried free banking and wildcat banking in the 1800s, and Dr. Jeff, he likened that to like Starbucks points, or like when you have like the state of Ohio has their own money and the bank there. Well, like, great, we see why. Do you liken, and where I'm going with this is, do you liken these AI models, a lot of them, like we just accept now in a way, ChatGPT? And on the interview that you had with Natalie a couple months ago, you even talked about the Google search result. Like it just was like, oh, I'm going to go through a couple pages, and then it was like, well, I'm just going to go through like the first page, and now it's just like, whatever the first result is, if there's an ad there or whatever Google wants there. Is that kind of where we're at with AI in a way, where people just accept it like, oh, it's ChatGPT, that's the one, I'm just going to use that now, kind of first mover advantage, when there really could be a million of these and the best AI will win type of thing? Like, how do you kind of see this playing out? Because like, again, I see yours and what you're doing as like, wow, it's a model built on truth and the real facts. Like that's gotta win over this all other garbage that people are already realizing is garbage. So does that make sense in a way? I hope I'm thinking about that kind of correctly.
We want to thank our sponsor. This show is presented by Bitcoin Trading Cards, an orange pill in a pack, making talking about things that normally make you want to cry fun and easy. The scarcest and most educational cards to ever exist, available now.
Yeah, I don't know how to tie that into the free banking piece, but let me just talk to the
No,
second
I was using that
piece,
as an
which
example.
is
Don't even, yeah.
Okay. The What's going to win out? ChatGPT fundamentally has a massive lead, right? But what we're finding in the AI space in general is that, and this is going to sound strange, but nobody actually knows what the fuck is going on. Honestly, I've come to the conclusion that ChatGPT was a fluke. That a lot of these AI models are really just trial and error, and something pops out and something's half decent, and sort of they run with it, they go with it, and then every time they iterate, they change shit, and oftentimes it gets worse. Sometimes it gets better. Like we've had this challenge internally. Is we one of our really early models was quite good, and then we were like, oh, okay, I think we figured something out. So we took that process, we refined it, did a bunch more work, and then produced another model. And we were like certain it was going to get better, and it got worse. And we're like, what the fuck? Like I don't understand. And the AI space, and even the top thinkers in it, the people who came up with how to train these models, are basically openly saying at the moment, they're saying, look, it's 90% art, 10% science.
Wow.
We're all making it up as we go. So the OpenAI guys definitely had some sort of secret sauce, whatever it was, or fluke, or some blend of the two, and they are out ahead. The fact that they have turned it into sort of a thing that toes the party line, to a large degree, can be expected. That's obviously what they were going to do. The nature of the content that they use to train the model is toes the party line already, right? It's Wikipedia essentially. So that is obviously going to just like say what is something that the normies will believe in. So to kind of tie it back to what you were asking, all kind of software products and everything like this will always be subject to power laws. So there's someone's going to gobble up 80% of the market, and then everyone else is going to compete for the other 20%, and that'll happen whether we're on a Bitcoin standard or not, right? Maybe in the current paradigm, instead of a healthy 80-20, we get like an unhealthy 99-1, right? So you get this like really skewed sort of effect, and that's sort of the danger that I've been talking about with AI for a while. Is it's not that AI is going to grow sentient and kill us and all this sort of shit. That's all bullshit. There's no AGI, there's no like consciousness that's going to emerge out of the circuits. That's all like Yuval Harari's wet dream, right? Like that's not what we're talking about. The only reality is being able to basically prescribe what truth is. And the challenge though, and I've become even less concerned about that as a problem too, because normies are just going to believe what they're told anyway. And whether they're going to believe what they're told from ChatGPT or from Google or from the TV or for whatever stupid influencer they follow on Instagram or Twitter, they're just going to believe the same shit anyway. So like you can't save the normies. If anything, I've started to believe that the ChatGPT and Gemini and all the wokeness that is embedded in these AIs is actually going to be a net benefit for us, because we humans who have agency, like the player characters, right, the real people, we're actually going to just be ourselves and prosper, while the rest of the NPCs are going to be non-differentiable from the bots, and they'll sort of all dissolve into a gray goo. And quite frankly, fuck them. I don't care. Like, they can be as gray gooey as they want to be. Like, I'm just no longer concerned that it's a massive risk. I mean, maybe you could argue at some point, all right, the regulators and the powers that be mandate the use of approved language models for anything that you're trying to build. And, could that impede people with a brain? Possibly. Do I still use ChatGPT? Not a lot, honestly. Like where I was using it almost daily 6 months ago, I'd be lucky to use it once a week now, maybe once every 2 weeks, for just a random like faster search, which then I go and validate on Google anyway and do a bit more digging. But beyond that, like I almost feel sorry for people who have transformed their entire lives to make it dependent on ChatGPT, for example, because one, they're losing their own mental faculties; they can't think for themselves, and two, they're just getting garbage back anyway. So it's like, I don't know. Anyway, like I've sort of my thinking is constantly evolving on this, and I really, where I was ringing alarm bells earlier on about the threat, it seems that like the threat is more innocuous than what I originally thought.
It's fascinating. I mean, obviously people are so just enthralled with it right now. Can you, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that will listen to this that are older, younger, whatever. Could you just take a minute actually and kind of explain what these large language models, like the pattern recognition, kind of what they are, regurgitating things? Could you kind of go into just explaining that so the average person can understand what it is?
Yeah, sure. The basis of all of it is we figured out how to codify language and the meaning of language in numbers, right? So there's this stuff called vectorization, which is the process of taking words and sentences and associating a vector to it. And a vector is a number, and that number can have multiple dimensions. This is where the mathematics sort of gets a little bit wild, but basically, instead of associating a word based on the letters it has and the number of letters, so like cat and hat, to a traditional computer might have been associated, but from a meaning standpoint, a cat and a hat are completely separate. So in a vector space, a cat and a hat will be very distant from each other, but a cat and a dog, which is spelled differently, will be much closer to each other, right? So in the process of figuring out this vectorization, this transformation of words, sentences, letters, meaning, and everything like that into meaning represented by numbers, we've managed to then build AI models, which shouldn't even be called AI, like machine learning models or statistical probabilistic models that can basically do sentence complete, which is essentially what language models are. They are sophisticated autocomplete, where you provide an input and it then provides an output that is semantically related. So in other words, it's associated, or it understands, and I say that in air quotes, it understands the meaning associated to what you're asking, and it'll give you an output that is semantically related or related in meaning to what you've asked. And a lot of people, and I was one included in the early days, I thought there was some understanding going on in here.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are still convinced that, oh, the machine understands. And the more I've dug, the more I realized, no, it's not. It's just the law of large numbers applied to language now. That's literally all that's happened, which is very different from, oh, the machine is alive. And it's really funny because it's a classic self-owned by the nerds. Like the nerds are always like, oh yeah, we're going to live brain in a vat. Oh yeah, we're going to live 1,000 years. Oh yeah, the body doesn't matter. Oh yeah, we're just like, according to Yuval Harari, we are just biological programs with no soul and no, agency and all this sort of shit, whatever he says, right? And the funny thing about this self-own is all of these idiots were literally convinced. They were like utterly convinced. There's a whole book about it called Superintelligence, that if we crack language, we have cracked general intelligence, which means general intelligence to superintelligence is a really small gap and the machines take over. Well, we cracked language 18 months ago and nobody gives a fuck, and humans still run the world. So it's literally classic self-own. They overproject everything because they don't understand the nature of humanity is far more complex than just sort of these computational elements. So really all we've done in the AI space is we've discovered that a large part of language has to do with patterns and probability, and we've figured out how to compute those patterns and probability and apply it to language. That's it. It's not magic. It's not, I would say it's rocket science because it is, mathematically really sophisticated and it is incredible, but it's not alive. It's not magical. It doesn't have a spirit, doesn't have a soul, and it's definitely not as doomsday or as utopian as people try to make it sound.
So, Spirit of Satoshi, this, what are you guys hoping to achieve? What's the end goal, the end state for this? Obviously we just did the collaborative between Spirit of Satoshi and Bitcoin trading cards. Got a bunch of packs laying around here. And
awesome. I haven't even seen them yet. Can't wait.
I know. So we got to get you. We were just talking about that the other day, actually. So, get you some, but we just launched this. What was this? 2 weeks ago, something like that, right around there. And this effort, they're beautiful. Actually, I'll share it here in a second here, just what it looks like, just so people can see. But what is the end goal of Spirit of Satoshi? What you guys are trying to do to, is it getting it out to everybody? Obviously you start small and building this. I mean, walk me through the end goal, but also even the complexity. Like there's, I was watching when you were on stage, I think it was down in Brazil, and it takes time for this thing to learn, for you to input the things and for it to grow over time as you're doing it, as the human is, doing it. So walk me through, I guess, the mission, where you guys are kind of going long-term, and what the complexities are that you guys are dealing with.
For sure. So if I had to sum it up in one sentence, I would say that we want it to be a conversational interface for all of the Bitcoin content and knowledge out there, right? And that's probably the easiest, simplest way to define the essence, the raison d'etre for why this thing exists. Whether there's a commercial application for that long term, that remains to be seen. I think maybe the commercial element is some sort of embedding in Bitcoin products and services so that it's there as an education system or whatever. I mean, partnering with people like you guys to kind of bring the Spirit of Satoshi character to life. We've done this 21 questions book, which we're going to do a whole series of these books. So we got like 21 questions, the original edition. And that's like, we took out of the thousands of questions that we trained Satoshi on, we sort of distilled it down to the 21 most pertinent, common, and important for people as they start their Bitcoin journey. And we answer those 21 questions with both the AI and also a bunch of different, Bitcoin thinkers, right? So Toma, Natalie Brunel, Pablo's in there, Max Hildebrand, Giacomo Zucco, like all awesome thinkers like Knut Svanholm, all this sort of people. And what that means is we're trying to find applications for the AI itself outside of just it being a chatbot that lives on the internet, right? So like a chatbot that lives on the internet, people will go, they might spend some sats and ask it a couple questions. Happy days, that's fine. But like beyond that, what can we do? And that's the big challenge to figure out, right? Is how do we monetize it? And is there a real monetization angle here? Because one thing I will say as a side note is no one's really cracked the code of how to monetize in the AI space yet. A lot of it is just a money losing endeavor, basically. And part of that is like the mechanics are very different to traditional software companies. A traditional software company, you build a piece of software, and your marginal cost of adding a user is basically zero. In AI, your marginal cost of adding a user is often more than what they'll pay you because you have inference costs. So like the models, the business model hasn't really been figured out, and that's why like ChatGPT, it has the most subscriptions by far, but they lose money every single day. The subscriptions do not cover what it costs to operate the thing. So it's an interesting place. But to come back to it, if you could have this utility, this archive, this conversational archive of Bitcoin content and knowledge, or Austrian economic knowledge, whatever, like, within that frame of reference, could you embed that across applications? Probably. Could it be a place like? Could it act as a Nostr assistant, or a Twitter character or something like that people can interact with and get some real information and data from? Sure, I think so. I think there is something there, and we will continue to pursue that. But it's by. I don't think, as I did in the beginning, that there's a huge like massive business here. I think it's more going to be like a public utility that we make for the Bitcoin community. We'll open source it and we just give people access to it and say that, hey, we went out and that's what we went out to build, and we built that.
That's so cool. I'm going to share this other one too of the site as well. What was your impressions of the cards? Like you said, I know you don't have any physically, but when you saw the mock-ups and kind of what they are looking like, I think Aladdin actually just sent them to the printer, I believe, in the last week, or got them out to the printer. So those will be coming soon physically. What were your first impressions when you saw those? I'm guessing you were like,
gorgeous.
I know. When I like a year and a half ago, when I was telling you when this first got going, I didn't know what to expect. And I saw him like, dang, what was your first impression?
Yeah, basically the same thing. I saw him, I was like, damn, these are sexy. Because I'd heard about the trading cards like through another friend, and he mentioned, and like I was like, okay, that's interesting, but like I didn't get it. And
you don't get it right
when
away.
I caught up with Aladdin, exactly, yeah, and we started digging, we started understanding. We're like, holy crap, there's something really cool here. And yeah, I mean that's obviously how the collab sort of initiated. So yeah, I'm totally glad we did that.
That's so cool. How did you guys get together? Was it who was coming to who? I don't even remember how that came about.
Honestly, I don't entirely remember either. Old age, bro. It's getting to me. It was, yeah, who knows? It was one of us. It could have been me that approached Aladdin with like a brain fart of an idea to do like a single card. And then I think it was Aladdin who countered and said, no, let's do a whole set, and then do like some special edition things that you guys can put on a crowdfund. So yeah, I think that's sort of how it all came together.
Very cool. Cool. We will kind of transition into some other, I guess, not current events, but kind of current events, into things that are going on. You mentioned something earlier. And by the way, I'll put the links down here. Obviously, I showed the crowdfunding, so everyone can see that. We'll put that up there, and Geyser and everything, get the links to all that, so people can see the collaboration there, and then Spirit of Satoshi, obviously the site and everything, so people will be able to easily go to that. You mentioned earlier I don't know if there's a wealth gap specifically, but it made I forget exactly how you said it, but it made me think of the wealth gap. And a lot of people, me included, I used to think in a way like, oh, this will decrease the wealth gap and things of that nature. But again, to the 80-20 rule, like you kind of mentioned earlier, the strong should get stronger, in a merit-based society, really at the end of the day. When I first came to Bitcoin, I was like, oh, this will help kind of decrease that. But in a way, it's going to promote obviously more efficiency. And there's going to be people that increase their power in a sense, in a way, but that's not a bad thing, obviously. So this is something you've been kind of talking about. Not a lot of people talk about it in the space. So I'd love for you to kind of go into this a bit and elaborate on why this is actually important to even see an increase in the wealth gap, but still that bottom is coming up exponentially faster than anything we see in the fiat system. So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's a take that, funny enough, rubs just a lot of people the wrong way, because I think it's and it's not just an everyday take, right? It's not like we've been brainwashed with sort of liberalism for the last 300 years, and it's basically in our it's in our epigenetics now. Like people feel guilty about being better.
Yes.
People feel guilty about excelling, and we've transformed our civilization from a shame oriented one to a guilt oriented one. And a shame oriented society is one in which your peers point out what is wrong and shame you to some degree into making it better. And it might not be nice, it might not be pretty and all this sort of stuff, but generally what happens is it forges stronger characters. Whereas a guilt-based one, it makes the best of us feel guilty, and it removes the shame from the people who are either being lazy, who are being fat, who are not doing anything with their lives, etc. And we create acceptance for that. And slowly by slowly, the people who do want to put the effort, who do want to, work hard, or, look after themselves or build stuff and everything, they feel guilty. So they start lowering their standards. And then the people who are accepted for having low standards in the first place maintain low standards, and everything starts to descend in society instead of ascending. You get an ascendant society, one that is shame based. You get a descendant society, one that is guilt based, and that comes down to kind of the orientation around the gaze of like where people are going. So are you orienting society for equality or for excellence? Because they're diametrically opposed. Equality, you can't get equality by rising people up, because people rise up at different levels. So you'll always, not get equality. But you can get equality by cutting everyone down to the same size, right? Because you don't have to deal with the fact that people are different. You just cut everyone down, give everyone the same thing, and that's essentially how communism and all these sort of things work, right? And doing that actually creates a situation where, in fact, everything starts to spiral downwards. You get what's called the oppression Olympics, as I call it, which is everyone is like more oppressed, and I've got this problem, so feel sorry for me. And someone was like, damn, that guy's got a bigger problem than I do. I better create a bigger problem for myself so that I get more handouts. So then everyone starts to have like this sort of like victim mentality, and we sort of we bring ourselves down. And I think no one likes to admit it, but we all know it's true, is wealth and everything else that is worth having long-term compounds. We talk about it in a very non-politically charged dimension, which is in making money, so compound interest, right? But everything you do compounds. Knowledge, your health, your money, your balance, your genetics, like everything compounds. And by definition, if someone is making good decisions on a consistent basis and they're compounding and they're getting stronger, they're getting more powerful, they're getting, they're channeling more energy, they are going to accelerate away from the person who's not making those decisions and who is behaving lazily or slothfully or poorly, or they're not like compounding their wealth. Like that is going to happen. And that is why everything in civilization, everything in existence ends up in sort of this 80-20 skew. It also has a self-correcting mechanism, because you can't have a perfect score of getting things right. You know what I mean? Like, so you can't like compound to eternity. Like otherwise everything would end up becoming infinite, and like it just doesn't work that way, right? So there's always like some sort of, the story arc shifts, the energy of the time shifts, the trend changes, and you end up getting like a rebalancing, and then you get a new 80-20 that emerges and forms up somewhere else, right? And people sort of like they over project how like natural inequality can work. They're like, oh yeah, but you'll end up with a single monopoly on everything. And it's like, well, we live in a fiat society which fundamentally creates monopolies artificially. And despite that, we still don't have a pure one world government and one company that runs and does everything. So it's like monopolies are really fucking hard to maintain, right? So it's like they don't just happen naturally. You do get a natural 80-20 split. You do get aggregation around good decision making. You do get an enhancement of power, energy, strength, wealth, etc. around those the 20% who make the best decisions. But there's some dynamism involved in there, which naturally rebalances itself in a marketplace, in a society, in a civilization. And the worst thing we can do is what we're doing today in civilization, which is why we don't have an 80-20, we have a 99-1, is that those who make initially good decisions and start to compound their wealth, compound their power, etc., when they make bad decisions, they're close enough to the monetary spigot so that the cost of the poor decision is then socialized on, initially it was 80-20. So then the 20% worked out how to socialize their losses with the 80%. So then it became 10%, 90%, then it became 95-5, then it became 98-2, then it's 99-1. And sort of like, you just keep, whoever's like, it's this game of like musical chairs almost, right? And it's like, just dump the losses on the Muppets, on the rest of us, and sort of privatize whatever gains you can, and that creates a really unstable system, and that is only possible when you can steal without anybody watching, right? So anyway, I'm going off on all sorts of tangents here, but fundamentally speaking, you want 80-20, you want inequality, you want the inequality to be dynamic, you want the focus and the gaze and the orientation to be around excellence, not equality. And you'll naturally get a more healthy system. And the healthier the system, the better it is for everybody. And that's sort of what you want.
You said, and I have all kinds of notes I've taken just over the years and over the last few months of just interviews you've done, and I always try to keep good notes really on everyone's interviews. It's just kind of cataloging and which is the linguistic, like the things that you're doing, obviously writing things. Many of us I know taking notes and notepads or note apps, just filled with unbelievable things, which is kind of coming full circle to the Spirit of Satoshi thing of helping people build this truth model. And people can go to that site actually that we showed, and again, links to that to help build that model. Again, it's open source, so again, another plug for that, because that's how we're going to build these things, with the notes, with the recordings, all the things that we have. So again, on that, this power is a function of responsibility. Again, it's something that you've been talking about recently as well. And the measure of a man, the Plato quote, kind of paraphrase, the measure of a man is what he does when he has power. And or the character being, character, what you're doing behind closed doors, the type of mentality. And power doesn't corrupt. I mean, fiat, you just touched on this. It's fiat incentivizes the bad and weak actors to do bad things, and then rewards them with that false power. You see, like the elites or the honorable so-and-so when they're going to Congress to testify here in America. And it's like this false sense of like power or structure, like they're above us, when in reality it's completely flipped. I think that's fascinating. Like, this is such a fascinating talk that just society is just, I think, getting ready to maybe have. What do you think?
I mean, there's been a palpable shift in the energy, and I spoke about this. I wrote an essay at the beginning of the year about that. Like, there's a new energy is rising, and you see that with the Malays and the Bukelas of the world. And I really tried to push that point home at the panel I did in Madeira just a couple of weeks ago, or a week ago actually. Yeah. It hasn't even been a couple of weeks. And everyone sort of came up to me afterwards saying, "Oh, that was the best panel of the whole event." Blah blah. It's like so at least someone's saying something different for once,
right?
Because everyone I was laughing about this. Like, I want to do just a meme talk at the next Bitcoin conference, just called Bitcoin Platitudes, and just say shit like Bitcoin is energy money, yay, and let everyone clap, and then just say like we need more women in Bitcoin, and then just let everyone clap, yay, and then just say something like Bitcoin is for the people. yay, you know,
Have
it's
you
like,
ever seen I don't know if it's over by you, but in America, the Family Guy, Seth MacFarlane's Family Guy. I remember, like, when I was in college 20 years ago watching that, and then like Lois, the girl or lady, was running for mayor, and then they had her go on stage, and she just kept like saying 9/11, and the people kept cheering harder and harder. She's just like
okay,
9/11. They're like, yeah, like she just kept doing it.
dude, that is literally what's happening in the Bitcoin space at the moment. It's driving me fucking crazy, and this is why I'm coming out with these unconventional sort of thoughts, which is, hey, you know, screw all of this, like, oh, you know, we're here to help the little person, and like, you know, oh, you know, all, you know, government is evil, and let's just, you know, non-aggression principle. It's like, no, 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 fuck that. You know, we've been playing defensive the entire time, and yes, you know, Bitcoin is defensive tech, but that doesn't mean you just like run and hide the whole time. Is like, we need to claim back territory. We need to conquer again. We need conquest.
Yeah.
And you know, people are like, oh, you know, that is bad, that is evil, you know, like colonizer and everything. It's like, no, well, fuck you. Like, someone is going to colonize, someone is going to conquer, someone is going to expand their territory. And it's either going to be the parasites, or it's going to be those of us who have a healthy relationship with power, with strength, with energy. And we take on the role, because the biggest thing we've done is we've started to believe shit like power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. You know, if I like the amount of, and like we laugh about it now because, you know, we've got some rapport, but I guarantee you, I used to say that all the fucking time. Every Bitcoiner at some point in time has said that. And I would argue that 99% of Bitcoiners still believe that. You know, like, I even hear the term, like I was just thinking about it the other day, speaking truth to power. That implies that power is not truthful, right? So it's like, it's even in our fucking language. We sort of have this really bad
Weaponization of
relationship with
language.
power. Right? Exactly. Yeah, we have a completely inverted, retarded relationship to the concept of power, which when you think about it, and this, let me just, for the Bitcoiners listening to this, most Bitcoiners run around and they talk about proof of work, good, proof of work, yes, proof of work, proof of work. Proof of work is a relationship to energy. It is a channeling of energy over time. That is work. Work is energy across time. Power is the same fucking mathematical relationship with energy. It is the capacity to channel energy across time. Proof of work is power. Like, in the same sentence, a Bitcoiner will tell you proof of work good, power evil. Like, it makes no fucking sense. And we need to change our relationship with power, because the biggest uh, lie the devil told you, and I'm just making this up out as I go, but the biggest lie the devil told you was that you should that power is evil, that power corrupts, and that you should abdicate power. Because when you and I abdicated power, positions of power, positions of influence, positions of leadership, we left the vacuum for the parasites to fill. And that's the biggest problem today, is that these structures that exist in some capacity will always exist. You know, with the internet and with sort of Bitcoin, the structures will evolve and mold, but we'll always have hierarchies. And in every hierarchy, hierarchies are power oriented. You have more influence at the top of the hierarchy, and that is not a bad thing. It's a bad thing if you allow the parasites to enter that position, because then they degrade everything. And that's essentially what is happening today. And that's the root of the cancer that we're facing. And that is why my argument is that Bitcoiners and non-Bitcoiners who are men of character need to don the responsibility of wielding and channeling that energy, that power, that strength. Because if they don't do it, the scumbags will.
Yeah, man, it makes me think of so many things, Alex. Like, you look at, like, again, American football, you look at American baseball, you look at American hockey here, or whatever it is, and you've got leaders all over the place. They just aren't in politics anymore because they're not incentivized to be in politics. I mean, what better example of this world we used to have, where the leaders went to the military, they went to these places of power, prestige, and they were men of character or whatever it was. And now those guys are like, F that, I'm out of here. Like, why would I go do that? And you have people that don't even, they're the good people, like we said, the politics all the time. Like, no one wants to go there because whatever the reason being. So to your point, like that is the answer. It's beautifully said and explained, because the average person sees that like cliche almost of like, well, the good people don't go there type of thing, the mentality. Well, it's like, well, that's why. That's exactly why, because they're not incentivized. The shitheads are the ones that are incentivized to be the ones corrupting things and selling their soul. The good people are like, no, I'm good. Like, I don't need to go sell my soul. I'll go do something else. And then we're run by the shitheads. But
Exactly. So, there was a great tweet from Elon Musk yesterday about like the knight killing the dragon. I don't know if you saw it on Twitter. And he kills the dragon, looks for the pot of gold, and he finds like what was it, like a sewing machine or something that produces stuff. And the knight's like, hey, where the fuck's my pot of gold? And the dragon's dying. Is like, it's not the gold that matters. That is the thing that produces the wealth. And I think a lot of Bitcoiners also get carried away with this idea of, hey, just buy Bitcoin and sit around and do nothing, right? And that's not everyone. Everyone's out there hustling in whatever capacity. But if we win and all of civilization burns down around us, well, we just had what's called a Pyrrhic victory, which means you win, but you didn't fucking win. We will hold all the Bitcoin, and our Bitcoin will be worth zero because the civilization is, in ashes. So, like, while we are stacking sats, while we're building our Bitcoin balances, while we're claiming this property, this immutable property, which is supposed to represent and reflect more accurately real wealth, we actually have to go out there and build fucking real wealth, build businesses, build civilization, build communities, build stuff that the Bitcoin can then reference and measure. And that's how we all become wealthy, by creating and having the measurement of what we're creating being accurate and unconfiscatable. That's the name of the game there, those two things. And we have to build in every single dimension. It's not just private businesses, but we need to influence the next generation, and we need to do that in every way possible.
Brilliantly said. And that's, again, the Spirit of Satoshi, the Bitcoin trading cards. How are we orange pilling people? How are we getting people truth, incepting them, the Trojan horse in different ways? I love that. The weaponization of language, we talked about this a little bit ago, kind of circling back to this for a second. And you were saying how Bitcoiners, we get caught sometimes in our, we're humans, right? So we get caught in these patterns, we get caught in these things as a community, and the cliches, platitudes. One of them, again, being number go up technology. I mean, really, at the end of the day, if you think about it, it's not number go up technology. It's life gets cheaper technology, or as you've said many times, responsibility go up technology. And that's really, I think, one of those mindset shifts, those language shifts we need to start using, so we're not falling into that trap of weaponization. Because again, a lot of the FUD you get at times is, hey, number go up, like, oh yeah, you moon boys, or oh, what, you're gonna be the wealthiest people on earth, and like there's the people, this wealth gap argument and all of these things. What are your thoughts on just, again, like the weaponization of language and us being very careful of how we're using it? It's good at times, like you said, there's the counterintuitive nature of saying polarizing things at times, like you said, kind of flipping this, hey, we need a Bitcoin conquest, but at the same time, you do have to be careful with how you're saying things and falling into kind of the fiat traps. That's probably the best way to say it, even.
Yeah, I mean, that's hard because, I mean, particularly the NGU one, I've got a interesting relationship with that one. There's this funny meme, which is, it's this cycle of like, Bitcoin price goes up, friends and family think I'm a genius. Bitcoin price goes down, friends and family think I'm an idiot. Bitcoin price goes up, and it's like sort of like this never-ending cycle, right?
Yep.
And NGU works 25% of the time, basically.
Right.
Because Bitcoin is a seasonal thing, and it grows in seasons. So you're right, 25% of the time. The other 75% of the time, you're an idiot. And that's fine. I guess the question is like, is it a strong enough meme? I think it's the right meme for a particular season, and then in the other part of the season, we just need a different meme. That's it. It's not right or wrong. It's about using it appropriately. And I mean, for many people, the reason we came to Bitcoin was to get rich, and then we found something else, right?
Yeah.
And that, like, it's not, and I don't even want to say like getting rich is a bad thing. It's not a fucking bad thing. Like, there's like this sort of idea that people think, oh, everything that's superficial is bad. That's true to some degree, but like, if you want to get to the root of something, if you want to get to the core of something, like if you wanted to drill to the center of the earth, guess where you have to start? On the surface. Like, you need to start with superficial stuff, and you need to dig. And the more you dig, the more you find depth and meaning and something more, right? And maybe to a large degree, like, some people just remain in the superficial surface forever, and the few who have the ability to dig beyond the surface, they're the ones that you're actually meant to make friends with and build relationships with, etc. And that's essentially what we're finding, I guess, to a large degree in the Bitcoin community, is that we're finding kindred spirits, right? As we said at the outset.
Yeah.
And we can't not everybody can be a kindred spirit. Not everybody can be this like Renaissance man. But the beauty is that there is a surface, and some people remain on the surface. Others will go and burrow down. They'll find deeper things, and they'll relate about that journey, the deeper things that they find along the way. And maybe for a large cohort of humanity, the NGU tech is going to be the best way to get them across what we're doing. And for the rest, no. For the people who have some more depth and who are more curious and who are more interested in the nuance, they might find responsibility God technology as the more important thing. But I would venture there's another 80-20 there, right? There'll be 80% that'll do the NGU, 20% that'll do the RGU, and each one will come with its trade-offs, and each one feeds into the other. So it's not right, wrong, good, bad. It's all necessary.
It's a great framing, and that's how I'm going to look at it going forward, because that is, like you said, it's seasonal, and you have to take out, if you're going hunting, you're not bringing your fishing pole. You got to use the right weapons at the right times, and that's I love the way you frame that. So again, kind of along this theme of Bitcoin reintroduces responsibility and consequences. Touch on it really quick. Why consequences, bad things happening, I guess we'll say, for the average person, or consequences. Why is this an important thing for human beings? Kind of this feedback loop. Why is that important to humans and learning?
So before we talked about like the dynamic nature of inequality, right? So you want there to be an opportunity to rise up and an opportunity to fall, right? And what makes both of those things happen is more good decisions compounds good results, and then you get ahead. Bad decisions do two things. One is they keep you down, or if you've made a string of good decisions and you make a bad decision, it'll set you back in a functional world, right? Because that's like a bad decision is bad because it set you back, right? Mm-hmm. So the point of a bad decision is for fucking feedback. Like, if you don't have feedback, you don't know how to improve. Yeah. And if you ignore the feedback from the bad decision, you don't know what to improve. And depending on the mechanism of ignorance, there could come a time where you ignore the bad decision, ignore the bad decision, ignore the bad decision, ignore the bad decision. You never learn. And then at some point, the mechanism that obfuscated the bad decision from the real consequence disappears, and you are left with nothing but air underneath you, and you make the next bad decision, and everything comes crumbling down, which is where we are in civilization at the moment, is that all of the bad decisions made by the parasite ruling class, you and I pay for. So they have no ability, even if we gave them the benefit of the doubt that they were somehow good people, they have no ability to relate the inflation, the increase in prices, the social unrest, and all that sort of stuff to their policy decisions, because they're not fucking paying for anything. Like, always, I've got this saying, which is, if you want to, like, if politicians had to pay for the programs and the social programs and everything that they sort of promote out of their own pocket, I guarantee you they wouldn't be promoting any of these things, right? So it's like, this is the thing about consequences. It's like, if I can jump off a cliff, dude, and you die on my behalf, what am I going to do? I'm going to keep jumping off a cliff, and everybody else dies for me. Like, the problem is reality doesn't work that way. And the more we create a society in which somebody else foots the bill for somebody else's decision, you just skew things. Like so people who otherwise need the feedback for the bad decisions they're making, they are robbed of the feedback. And the people who know they're making bad decisions but do it anyway because they know they can game the system, they just keep scamming the system, scamming the system. And when you scam the system, what you're doing is you're scamming everybody who's involved in the system, because that's like the only way the system has anything is from the people who are getting scammed, right? So the economy is a zero sum game. So like it's all one big shit show, and without real consequence. Because the thing is, I used to say this more blanket. I used to say, Bitcoin is a reintroduction of economic consequence. And what I realized, I was like, okay, that's wrong with one word. Economic consequence still exists. The problem is, fiat is it's socialized economic consequence. Bitcoin is the reintroduction of localized economic consequence.
Mm.
So if you lose your Bitcoin, well, there's no socialization measures to balance it out across everybody else. The consequence was just localized. And that is really, really important, because then the individual can adapt their behavior. And when individuals can adapt their behavior and transform, you get tribes that can adapt and transform. You get communities, you get civilization, sort of scales up and grows. Yeah. So feedback is the way human beings adapt. Feedback is the way all systems, all living systems, adapt and orient. And if you remove the localized consequences, you remove feedback, you remove that loop, and we just get dumber and dumber and dumber. We get weaker and weaker and weaker. And then when the mechanism, as I said, that obfuscates this is removed, because it at some point breaks down, you basically wipe out the whole system. And we're close to that now.
Yeah. And you touched on that. Was kind of one of my follow-up to that a little bit was, there's the elites, quote unquote, the ruling class, whatever you want to call them, trying to eradicate all the bad things from life, right? Like they're trying to do everything to put people in a bubble. And that's where we are when you have this localized, again, like even though, again, look at America, where it was decentralized as 50 states or whatever, 13 to now 50. And then it was, hey, if you do something stupid, California does something dumb, well, the other 49 get to learn from that. When you don't have that, instead of like, we're all doing it together like we do in America now, or like you said, if you have the whole tribe gets set back instead of one person, now instead of one person getting set back, and now we all get to learn from that and speed up, instead of now you set everyone back, we're trying to make it all. So I love that reframing, because that's really important. Like it's a little subtle nuance, but is it important? So important.
Totally.
So to this point, and I know we're getting towards the end here, so the Uncommunist Manifesto, you wrote that with Mark Moss. Give me your quick thoughts on, because I've been thinking about this lately, and I haven't read your book in a while. It was right when I came out, I read it, but I've just been thinking of it. And now it's funny that we're here talking about this, but it was just this thought of, can you have capitalism on a broken, fiat currency? You need true money, in my opinion. I would love your thoughts on this, because it seems that whenever you have capitalism and it's on good money, it generally works for as long as you need it to. But then once you deteriorate that foundation of the money, that is the foundation, we devolve into whatever, moral relativism, Marxism, etc. I would love to give me some thoughts on that, and let me know how you kind of see that layer, that money layer, and how it kind of goes from this pendulum from capitalism, and then you break it and it goes to chaos.
Totally. So that specific thought I've been thinking more about recently, and this is not in the book actually, but it's an epiphany that I've had recently. Is in the book we frame capitalism as an organic process, right? So it's not a political modality. It is just, look, capital is things and stuff and energy and time, basically. So resources, energy, time, and capitalism is the process of using capital efficiently and effectively. And then we make the argument that, hey, well, lo and behold, all living species do that. They use their time, their energy, and whatever resources they can harness. They use that. The more effectively and efficiently they use it, the longer they survive, and therefore every living species is involved in the game of capitalism, right? Humans we play far more complex games, so we can do this at much greater scale than say a beaver or a fish, right? So anyway, what I've come to realize that there is capitalism, the process, But then there's also capitalism, the political modality, because one thing we can't escape is the fact that we are social creatures,
Yeah.
and there is more than one of us. And because there is more than one of us, and because we're social creatures, there will always be some sort of governance structure that emerges, which then leads to the question of what should that governance structure look like. And the answer to that, I believe, has to do with the system that maps or that allows as best as possible the capitalist process to occur. And if that political modality, you want to call it capitalism, sure, like capitalism, the political modality is the one that allows for the natural process of capitalism to function. If that's capitalism, then fantastic. You can only have that. You can only have that uh, with a functional feedback mechanism and a functional language of value, which is another way of saying a functional money. If you don't have that, you don't get a natural process. Like the natural process starts to break down. So you, as much as you want to build a framework that emulates capitalism, as soon as you start printing money, you're distorting the signaling mechanism inside the system. So whatever governance structure you sort of apply on society thereafter starts to break down. It doesn't work. And yeah, so basically, you nailed it with what you said in the beginning. I guess it was a leading question, but um, you cannot emulate natural processes when you have a governance structure that is filled with basically artificial inflation, and that's essentially what a fiat money is. It artificially distorts the system in such a way that it can never map to the natural process that is capitalism, and you get a breakdown.
Do you think that it's like you said, it's always some governance structure, again, we're humans. Do you think it's capitalism in the future still just on good money and on Bitcoin, or do you think it's voluntarism? Like, what are your thoughts into the future? And then kind of leads in my other question, which is the 60 years, it's all hyper Bitcoinization, thing that everyone had a real big problem with over the last year as well. You coming out and saying that. What are your thoughts of what does this governance structure really look like in the future, and your thoughts obviously into the thoughts behind, I guess, the hyper Bitcoinization, decades from now?
I mean, I probably have the most triggering view on this, which is I think we're going to move back to the age of feudalism. I think feudalism is great. I think it's the most functional method of operation. And people, once again, have been brainwashed to think that feudalism was somehow bad or evil. We have feudalism today. It's just not called that. And it's just an ugly form of feudalism because we have less classes. But the reality of the fact is people kind of layer themselves in different classes anyway. And feudalism just made those classes clear and realized that different rights and responsibilities came with different classes. And so if you were a warrior or a knight in the feudal system, you had more rights than the peasant, but you also had way more responsibility because when the enemy came and attacked, it wasn't the peasant that was going to go out and fight. It was the knight's job to go out and protect. So there is a functional hierarchy that emerges out of feudalism. The difference being because we live in the commercial age and the digital age and the nomad age and all this sort of stuff, we'll probably have somewhat of a more meritocratically, commercially, capitalistically oriented feudalism, which will mean more permeability between the classes. And that's a good thing because what you'll get is beyond just the class that you're born in, you'll be able to sort of migrate between it. And sometimes that migration won't be the right thing. Sometimes some people just have a natural, like I can't imagine the kind of artistry that would sort of be evident in the world today had we not taken kids, for example, who have a predisposition for art and ram them into a fucking school system and try and teach them, physics and math and, whatever other bullshit they're teaching kids for 12 or 16 years now in school, right? So someone who could have been an artist, who was born to a parent who was an artist and he had sort of the genes and the predisposition for that, instead of going down that path, where, they flourished in life. They've been taught that, hey, we're all the same and we all deserve the same opportunity. So here, 12 years of your fucking life down the toilet, doing stuff that you didn't want to do in the first place. And then they discover they're an artist when they're 35 and it's too late and they're already old and pissed off now. So it's like, this is why we don't have Renaissance art anymore, right?
Yeah.
Like, so, the people who built these cathedrals, it was father passed down to son, became father, passed down to son, became father, passed down to son, right? So that class of people, the artisans, built these things. And then there was a class of people who are the patrons, the benefactors of these things, and they passed down the wealth and they made that possible. So to kind of tie it back into what I think the future will end up looking like is I think we'll have, meritocratic, capitalistic like feudalism, where we'll have many more territories than we'll have nation states today. And the territories will have to basically find their own balance of what is an economy and a diseconomy of scale. Because at some point, a territory like gets too large where it's not economically viable anymore and things have a diseconomy of scale. But finding where that balance is going to be, the game for future leaders. And that the size of the territory in terms of population, in terms of geographic size, is going to be dependent on multiple factors. Culture, the people, the terrain. Is it flat? Is it mountainous? Is it cold? Is it hot? What is the temperature variance? Like, all of these sort of things will come into play. And we, hopefully over the next 50, 100, 200 years, we'll end up with these different micronations, hopefully. And the leadership structure of those micronations, I believe, will be more CEO king-like. So you'll have this sort of reemergence of key figures who are leaders in that place. That doesn't mean we won't have republics as well. I think we'll start to look a lot more like, medieval Europe, where you had kingdoms and you had republics. Like, so you had Venice as a republic, Genoa as a republic, but then you had kingdoms, like the Florentines with the Medicis and everything, who, they were the sort of the people who basically backed all of the Da Vinci's and everything like that to produce all the beautiful art that we go and visit to today. So anyway, I think that's how civilization is going to transform. I don't know the steps. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. This is emergent, and you can't predict emergent phenomena. But I truly, fundamentally believe the democratic nation state is an aberration. I think it is something that was only made possible because we had to go through the Fiat experiment. And that's not to say that we're ever going to miss the Fiat experiment. It's just what humanity had to go through. And, the game that made the most sense on the Fiat experiment was to build large nation states that could justify printing money and taxing you to fucking death, right? So these are uneconomic, large-scale nation states that were only possible because we could run on a Fiat standard. And it all happened accidentally. It was just the incentives that emerged and oriented as this whole fucking experiment of life and existence happened. But we are in the end stages of that. And with the existence of something like Bitcoin, I truly believe the fabric of civilization is going to change, and it's going to look very different 100 years from now than it does now.
So in kind of wrapping here, I got one more quick question and then a little word association for you to wrap. Do you think we will look back 100 years from now? This is something I've been thinking about now for maybe 6 months, but like 100 years from now, it just really, to me, feels like people will look back and be like, these people are living through a modern dark age. And like, to the average person now, it's like, what are you talking about? Especially in the West. It's like, what do you mean we're in a dark age? To me, I look at, I'm like, well, we're killing our children inside of us. We're killing ourselves, and we're sedating ourselves to death, medicating ourselves to death. I mean, you go on and on and on. And it just to me, it feels like people are going to look back and be like, what were these people doing? Just psychotic behavior.
I mean, all I can say is I agree.
No.
What more can I say? Like, our descendants are going to look back and be like, the hell were these idiots doing, locking themselves up in a room for 2 weeks or for 2 years, basically, over a what? A flu? Who? What? Like, our ancestors are rolling in their graves, and our descendants are like, who are not born yet, are like looking at us from heaven or the galaxies or wherever they are at the moment in the soul dimension, saying, you absolute ass clowns. Wake up and grow up.
Wild. Absolutely wild.
Yep.
To end here, a new segment sponsored by Bitcoin Trading Cards. So we're a little word association. Just give you a word and give me, as quick as you can thought. I've got about 15 of them in there, something like that. So we'll rock through them before we end. So let's do this. Separation of money and state.
Bitcoin.
Mark Zuckerberg.
Lizard.
Satoshi Nakamoto.
Greatness.
Altcoins.
Shitcoins.
ESG and DEI.
Death.
Writing.
That's a good one. Thinking. Let's say that.
Shit posting.
Fun.
Hyper Bitcoinization.
Coming soon.
Citadels.
Future civilizations.
Wizards.
Retards was the one that came to me straight away. Damn, that one's changed. Okay.
AI.
Wizard of Oz.
Communism.
Ugly.
Capitalism.
Closer to beauty.
Bitcoin or freedom maximalist.
Bitcoin or freedom maximalist? Which one?
We'll go freedom maximalist.
I'm gonna say naive.
Let's go Bitcoin maximalist.
Also somewhat naive.
Responsibility.
The right thing to be a maximalist about.
Power.
Beauty.
Energy.
Power.
Bitcoin trading cards.
Very cool.
The Spirit of Satoshi.
Experiment.
Love it. Alex, appreciate you coming on. You passed the test. You passed the word association test at the end. So
amazing.
Thank you so much, brother. This is an absolute blast. We'll have to do it again at some point. Talk about some of the other stuff you have going on, possible collaborations there. That would be an absolute blast. 100%. These cards turned out phenomenal too. Obviously, they just look gorgeous. So, man, where can people find you?
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
That was awesome. Really appreciate it. People can find me if they just type in svetsky.info, SVETSKI.info. It's got my link tree with all the fucking links of everything. And if anyone wants to be triggered, they can go and read the Nietzsche article, which is the top one on my link tree. You and I touched on a couple of the points there. But I promise you it'll challenge your thinking. It'll challenge sort of the general platitudes that get thrown around in the Bitcoin space and in the broader space. But yeah, my Twitter is in there. Everything is in there. If people want to just link there and connect with me, reach out, say hi, whatever. I always get people reaching out, and my DMs are open. I try to get back to everyone as best as I can.
Well, no one can not say that you don't challenge popular opinion. Let's just say that. But again, I do truly appreciate you because you do push the narrative forward and expand. I guess you expand the context. I guess maybe better than quite anybody, I guess, in the Bitcoin space. So appreciate you, brother. And thank you so much for coming on. Being a playable character.
Thanks, man.
We need them.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for checking out this episode of the Playable Characters Show, brought to you by Bitcoin Trading Cards. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the future Bitcoin and financial experts we have on the show. Plus, we will be doing random big giveaways throughout different moments of shows of collectible cards, sats, merch, and more from guests, so you won't miss anything. This show does not constitute any investment advice, only freedom advice. Everything you see here is opinions from the host and the guests themselves, nothing further. Please don't trust, verify. For full transparency, I do lead marketing efforts at Bitcoin Trading Cards where we are trying to spread freedom to all of humanity and orange pill the world, one collectible physical trading card at a time, by making things fun and easy to talk about that normally make you want to cry. You can reach me directly through my email, brandon@btc-cards.com, with any inquiries or playable character suggestions. See you on the next one.